I have a theory about kids and money. Patience is invisible, but snacks are immediate. That is why compound interest feels like wizardry when a child first gets it. The problem is not that the math is hard. The problem is that waiting is hard, and most adults do not explain what waiting actually does to dollars. I see the same scene all the time. A kid gets birthday money, an adult says save it, and nobody explains what the saving is buying. It is not just future stuff, it is growth on growth on growth. In a minute, I will translate that into dollars so it lands. But first, a quick note on how I run this show. I break money ideas into plain English, test them with real numbers, and keep the tone calm because confident decisions come from clarity, not hype. If this kind of breakdown helps, hit like and subscribe so the algorithm knows to bring you back. And drop a comment with the age you want to start the compound interest habit. I want this to be a running conversation where we upgrade family money skills together. Here is the situation we are solving. A lot of parents want kids to be good with money, but feel like every tip competes with 1,000 distractions and a timeline that runs on fast forward. The stakes are real. The earlier the habit lands, the less pressure there is later. The nice twist is that compound interest turns time into an ally, not a threat. When kids see how dollars quietly multiply, patience becomes a choice they actually want to make. I will keep it friendly, skip the jargon, and stay focused on the one mechanism that carries more weight than any allowance rule or chore chart. One small aside before we start. If money had a superpower, it would be cloning itself while nobody is looking. No cape, just a calculator. When I zoom out, the goal is not to raise little stock pickers. The goal is options. Options to say yes to school choices, to travel, to take a year off without panic, or to start a small business later without a lender breathing down their neck. Compound interest is the tool that buys those options quietly in the background. It does not require brilliance, it rewards behaviour. I want kids to connect 3 ideas early. First, money can work even when they are asleep. Second, small amounts matter if they start now. Third, debt flips the same engine against them. If those ideas click, the rest of personal finance gets easier. I am not aiming for a lecture, I am aiming for a habit. A habit is a tiny rule that runs without drama. For this topic, the tiny rule sounds like this. Put money aside first, let interest add to itself, and do not touch it unless the goal is met. That is it. The mechanics behind that rule do the heavy lifting. I will walk through dollar examples a child can repeat with a calculator, make the trade-offs honest, and point out the moments where people tend to quit. The destination is calm. Fewer what-ifs, fewer fights with future bills, and a much better shot at saying yes to the good things. If this resonates with the parent brain, it is because money pressure is rarely about a single big decision. It is about 100 tiny ones that either harness time or ignore it. Compound interest is how we stack those tiny wins into something that eventually looks like freedom. If compound interest is so simple, why do so many people miss it until their 30s or 40s? Hidden frictions. Kids live in a world where rewards are instant and numbers feel abstract. Adults live in a world where marketing is louder than math and the calendar feels like an enemy. One friction is confusion over rates. A bank might pay a few percent. An investment might average more but bump around along the way. Without a clean definition, the whole topic gets shoved to someday. Another friction is inflation. Inflation means prices drift up over time, so $1 next year buys a little less. If the growth on your savings does not beat that drift, purchasing power shrinks. There is also the social friction. People compare with friends, upgrade little things, and suddenly the plan to save is drowned out by subscriptions and convenience. Lifestyle inflation is sneaky because the new normal arrives quietly and never leaves. Fees play a role too. High account fees or credit card interest quietly reverse compounding and turn progress into a treadmill. And then there is the myth that small amounts do not matter. That myth dies the first time a child sees a tiny balance grow, but until then, small looks like zero. I am naming these frictions because teaching compounding is not just about showing a formula. It is about removing the little excuses that derail the habit. One dry joke for balance. If patience came in a snack-sized bag, this lesson would teach itself. Here is the change that unlocks progress. Simple interest pays only on the starting amount, called the principal. Compound interest pays on the principal and on all the interest already earned. That is, interest on interest. And it is the part that sneaks up in your favour. The core formula reads like this in plain text. A equals P times 1 plus R over N to the NT. A is the amount later, P is the amount you start with, R is the annual rate as a decimal, N is how many times per year interest is added, and T is time in years. If N is 1, that is yearly compounding. If N is 12, that is monthly compounding. Let's put real numbers on that. Start with 100 at 5% compounded once per year for 10 years. That is A equals 100 times 1 plus 0.05 to the 10, which lands around 162.89. Simple interest at 5% would have paid 5 per year for 10 years, ending at 150. The gap did not require extra effort. It came from adding each year's interest to the pile and letting the next year calculate on the bigger pile. Stretch the same 100 to 20 years at 5%, and the total is about 265.33. At 30 years, it is roughly 432.19. The first decade added about 63. The second added about 102 more. The third added about 167 more. The longer it runs, the bigger the steps get. That curve is why patience shows up as dollars later. One clarifier on rates. A savings account might pay around a few percent and fluctuate with the market for deposits. A diversified investment might average higher but jump around from year to year. The mechanism is the same either way. Compounding adds growth to growth and lets time do the heavy lifting. The rule is simple. The patience is the part to practice. A tiny aside, this formula is the rare math that pays rent in the real world. Now for the result that actually motivates follow-through. Start with a single gift of 100 at age 10 and let it earn 5% per year. By age 20, it is about 163. By age 30, it is about 265. And by age 40, it is about 432. That is without adding another dollar. Add a habit on top of that, and the numbers grow in a way that feels unfair in your favour. Here is a clean comparison that kids grasp quickly. Put 1,000 aside at age 10 and leave it at 5%. At age 40, that is about 4,322. Wait until age 30 to start with the same 1,000, and at age 40, it is about 1,629. The 10 lost years cost roughly 2,693, and that is with the same rate and the same contribution. Time did all the work. The rule of thumb I like here is rate times time beats brilliance. We cannot control yearly returns, but we can control start date and consistency. Okay, back to the big picture. The point is not to chase a perfect number. The point is to make the habit boring and automatic, so the growth becomes a background feature of family life. When kids see a balance tick up and understand why it happened, patience stops feeling like sacrifice. It starts feeling like strategy. That shift is the win. Here is a simple way I teach this at home without turning the kitchen table into a classroom. Pick a starting amount that feels real to a child, like 100 from a birthday. Write down today's date, the rate you expect from a savings account or investment, and the rule that interest stays in the account. Then set a reminder to check the balance on the same day each month. The first change is small, and that is the point. Early compounding is quiet. After a year, the story is easier to tell because the interest starts earning its own interest. For an extra nudge, add a tiny monthly contribution. 10 per month at 5% with monthly compounding grows to roughly 1,553 in 10 years. Without growth, it would have been 1,200. The difference, about 353, came from compounding. Stretch that same habit to 30 years and it is around 8,324 on contributions of 3,600. That is more interest than principal, which is a fun milestone to celebrate. I keep it light. I ask the child to predict the next month's interest before we check, and I connect the dots back to patience. A quick micro aside. If guessing the interest becomes a game, you have already won the lesson. This structure scales with any budget. If the number is 5 per month, the math still works. The habit matters more than the size. And if the goal is short-term, like a bike, use a separate bucket so the compounding bucket is not disturbed. Distinct goals make better decisions almost automatic. Compound interest acts like a snowball rolling down a hill. It starts slow, picks up a little more with each turn, and eventually becomes a thing with its own momentum. The math we already did shows that pattern in dollars. The mental model helps a child feel it. The first turns are tiny, that is normal. Tiny builds into meaningful. When a child adds even small contributions, the hill gets longer and the snow is stickier. 5% is a calm example because it keeps the focus on the mechanism. Higher expected returns with more risk will make the snowball grow faster on average and wobble more along the way. That wobble is why patient investors set rules in advance and avoid reacting to every headline. Here is a number that sticks. Contribute 50 per month for 18 years at 5% with monthly compounding. That comes out near 17,515 on contributions of 10,800. The interest portion is about 6,700. It did not arrive in a straight line. It arrived because each year the base got bigger. The visual I carry in my head is simple. First decade, practice. Second decade, traction. Third decade, acceleration. That sequence keeps expectations sane in the early years and reminds us why withdrawals early on are so costly. A quick aside for the grown-ups. Boredom is a feature here, not a bug. Now, the honest part about rates. A savings account offers a fairly stable rate that moves with the broader interest rate world. A broad stock market index fund is a basket that owns many companies and aims to match the market's return. It has historically produced higher average returns over long periods, with more ups and downs in the short run. The right choice depends on time horizon and risk tolerance. If the money is needed soon, safer and steadier wins. If the money will sit for years, the higher expected return can be worth the swings if the household can tolerate the ride. Inflation also matters. If inflation runs at 2% and a savings account pays 3%, the real return is roughly 1%. Real return means how much purchasing power grows after accounting for price increases. Here's the part most people miss. The compounding engine works the same in any of these settings. The key is matching the tool to the time. Long-term goals can benefit from higher return assets. Short-term goals from stability. And both benefit from consistency. Fees reduce the rate that actually compounds, so low-cost accounts and funds keep more of the growth working for you. Taxes can also change the picture, which is why accounts designed for specific goals, like education or retirement, can be useful. I keep the takeaway simple. Pick a rate assumption that fits the goal, set the contributions on autopilot, and let the calendar do its quiet work. The same engine that builds wealth can drain it when the direction flips. Debt with high interest takes the interest on interest idea and turns it into a balance that grows when ignored. A clean example makes it real. A credit card balance of $1,000 at 20% left alone for 3 years becomes about $1,728. That is, the A equals 1,000 times 1 plus 0.20 to the 3 version of the same formula we celebrated earlier. Month by month, 20% annual is roughly 1.67% monthly. On 1,000, that is about 16.67 in the first month. If the payment barely covers that, the principal does not budge. If the payment is missed, the next month calculates interest on a slightly larger base, and the snowball rolls the wrong way. Here's the part most people miss. Carrying a balance with a rate higher than the return on savings is like running up a down escalator. The math fights every step. Teaching kids to avoid that trap is as important as teaching them to invest. The rule is direct. Interest paid is the exact opposite of interest earned. One small aside to keep it human. The credit card is not evil. It is just very efficient at compounding in the wrong direction. Let's put real numbers on that and find the money to start. Stat. A household with 70,000 in income might see around 4,600 a month after taxes, depending on state and benefits. Wallet translation. That is the pool to cover everything life throws at you. Local example. In a mid-cost city like Kansas City, rent or mortgage might be about 1,400, insurance 300, loans 250, childcare 900, transport 500, groceries 600, utilities 250, phone 120, dining and extras 300. The quick stack hits about 4,620, which is tight but realistic and leaves a few levers. In a high-cost city like San Francisco, similar income with rent at 3,200, childcare 1,800, groceries 900 and transport 450 can push the stack over 6,000. That turns into a monthly deficit before tweaks. Geography changes the size of the hill, not the value of the habit. The strategy is to carve a small, automatic contribution that survives the month in both places. 10 to 25 per month for a child's compounding bucket is not nothing. It is a foothold. The behavior trick is to clip one recurring cost rather than play whack-a-mole with daily choices. One subscription or a small dining downgrade ends up funding the kid's future on autopilot. The verdict here is simple. In lower-cost cities, the stack can leave a few hundred to allocate and the habit can be larger. In higher-cost cities, the first goal is to avoid a deficit and still protect a tiny automatic transfer so the snowball exists at all. Options expand from there. Here is how I set this up so it runs without daily willpower. Pick the account that matches the goal timeline. For money needed within a couple of years, a high-yield savings account keeps the ride smooth and the compounding steady. For long-term goals like adult life launch money, a low-cost broad market index fund in a custodial account can raise the expected return with volatility you acknowledge upfront. Automate a transfer right after pay hits, so the decision is made once. Label the account with the goal so it feels off limits. Teach the child the one-sentence definition of compound interest and ask them to predict the next interest amount before checking the balance. Review once per quarter to keep the story alive and once per year to adjust the contribution if the budget allows. The ongoing rule is boring by design. Avoid dipping into the compounding bucket for impulse wants, keep fees low, and celebrate when interest earned in a period beats the contribution for that period. That is a fun milestone. Behaviorally, naming the goal, making it automatic, and measuring rarely beats any clever hack. It is enough. I will close with an invite. Share in the comments the age of the kid in your life and the first target you want to hit, even if it is as simple as 100 growing to 163 in a year. Like and subscribe if you want more calm, number-first money lessons that make family decisions easier. I will bring the math, the stories, and the gentle nudges. You bring the curiosity and the timeline.